Am I procrastinating on my research project by doing this video? Absolutely yes. I also have my tea because we're about to spill the tea. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I can't believe I'm saying this, but I'm actually a second year medical student. Like, how crazy is that? The first year honestly flew by so fast, and I didn't have as much time as I wanted to just vlog and capture raw emotions and do fun videos like this. So I figured it's summer, and what better time than now to do an honest review of the first year of med school. I have like a general list of topics I want to cover, but yeah, it's gonna be an interesting one. One question that I do get a lot is, how is the difficulty of med school compared to undergrad? And I definitely will say the material that you learn conceptually, it's not super different than what you learn in undergrad. Like, you're still going to be covering basic principles such as like molecular biology, which is what we learn in foundations in the first part of med school, or like generally, like if you took anatomy and physio when you were in undergrad, we cover the same things like when we start off in our foundational courses and build upon those topics. What distinguishes med school from undergrad is the sheer volume of information that you have to process, learn, memorize, and retain for the long run as compared to undergrad. And I know a lot of other people have said the same. You'll hear this phrase over and over again. It's like drinking water from a fire hydrant, and I can definitely attest to that. Certain med schools structure their curricula differently, so this will vary, but for my med school, we started off as like foundational knowledge, and this was slowly progressed into more systems based. There was a point where I was like, oh, we just finished like one of our longest modules, surely we'll have a slight break, and I was wrong. We like the module after that was heavy. It was really fast, a lot of work, a lot of material, everything all at once. I actually ended up enjoying that module like a lot more than I thought, and it's like one of my favorite modules, but it's one of those things where you're like, oh, surely next week is not going to be as crazy, but it comes back like just as crazy and like 2 times as crazy, if not more. Everyone's gonna have a different experience, but yeah, I will say med school, the material itself conceptually isn't like the craziest, but there's just so much that you have to learn and master and also retain for the long run because you're going to be studying for steps down the road. Another thing that kind of surprised me a little bit going into med school was knowing that like after finish everything in undergrad, like you do your extracurriculars, your research, you become that full rounded applicant, you still have to do the same in med school. Like, you have to apply to what's called the ERAS, the residency applications, and those also require extracurricular activities. So for example, clubs, research, volunteering, the same type of activities that you would apply for med school. And of course, on the scale with med school, you're also studying a lot at the same time, so it's hard to manage a lot of these clubs at the same depth that you would in undergrad. Of course, it's definitely manageable. A lot of my classmates and myself, we have different positions in different clubs, but this is something that you should be mindful going into medical school. Like, it's not just the studying, you still have to make sure that you have your extracurriculars, that you are doing your research, and you're getting out in the community and volunteering. Another thing that people ask me a lot is, how do I manage my time in medical school? And the short answer to that, for my case specifically, was I didn't. Like, I will get into it later, but the first year was definitely a transitional adjustment period, and my schedule was not a schedule. My regularity was irregularity. It was pretty bad, but I know going into M2 year not to do the same, but everyone's different. Biggest thing that helped me, having a planner. Planning is just literally, I started planning in high school, and I don't think I'll ever stop planning. And this can take the form of like literally a written journal or calendar, or some people use Google Calendar, but whatever you do, make sure that you have a sort of plan and structure to your day so that you know what you're working towards and you're not just simply going through tasks like without purpose, and you actually like know what to do. And also deadlines, being mindful of deadlines. There's a lot of things that can pop up really fast, especially in med school, so make sure you write down these deadlines and be mindful of them. And like the general rule of thumb that I use is, if you are on time, you're late. So I want to try to get things done early. In med school especially, it can be hard to stay like ahead. I used to in undergrad, when there was a lot more time, I would do things ahead, finish assignments ahead, submit ahead. Med school honestly is like the only time where I literally, some days I would do the assignment on the day it was due and submit it like a couple hours before it was due. It's just a lot, and I think it's something that you get used to as you go forward. Take tasks day by day, and sometimes you can't be ahead. Med school, you kind of try to keep up the pace and not fall behind. and you have to let go of some of the things that you might have been able to do in undergrad. This is just my experience, my other classmates. Some people are very ahead. I'm very happy for them, but everyone, once again, just like with anything else, everyone has their different schedule. Now let's get into a little tea. One thing I think is very interesting, and like someone needs to do a case study on this, is med school is kind of like high school. So if you think about high school, you are in a group of the same people that you see every day, day in and day out, and like the same class. And it's just like that for med school. Depending on your curriculum, if you do more in-person cases like my school does, you will see your classmates almost every single day, and you're basically in the same group of people. And just by nature, humans as we are, when you're in the same group of people, there can be tendencies for interesting things to happen. It's not like high school in the sense that in med school, you have people from different walks of life. You have people who are like me, fresh out of undergrad and going directly from undergrad to med school. And you have people who literally had entire careers and families and are also in med school. So it's a really great, diverse mix of different people from different backgrounds, which I really enjoy and think is super important. But at the same time, like, some parts of it can be a little bit like high school where you have like different groups forming, and there's nothing wrong with that, but it's just an interesting observation to make. When you spend a lot of time with the same group of people, you often tend to have relationships that develop, and I really love all of the couples that have formed in our class. It's really nice to watch them go through the med school journey together, but there's always the messy side of things that don't work out. So one pipeline that I'm going to speak to specifically, because this was my experience going in. So in undergrad, I basically studied all the time. I didn't really like go to parties or do a lot of hanging out or have a relationship or anything of that sort. I had an apartment that I was with my roommates for a couple years, but I was always studying, and then part of the time I also lived with my parents. So you definitely know, like I was like a hermit for my undergrad years. To grind, we're pre-meds, we're trying to get into med school. When you actually get into med school, some of that like suppressed experiences in life that other people experience either in high school or undergrad, that comes out, and that literally happened to me in med school. So it made the transition from undergrad to med school very chaotic, but at the same time I learned so much from it. But I will dive into it too, because this is part of my honest review. Absolutely nothing wrong with experiencing life and getting out there, and what I mean by that is like I went to a lot more like parties. I went to like a rave. I had this weird situationship thing that was happening. I went out, I went downtown, I even lost my phone, like different things like this. And there's absolutely nothing wrong, and you should of course go out and experience life. I wish I would have gotten some of it out of my system in undergrad when we're not dealing with like a transition from undergrad to med school curricula, and there's just a lot of stuff going on. I feel like that would have made my transition a lot smoother. In the end, I am still grateful for going through these experiences because they have made me a much stronger and more informed person moving forward. And I know for M2 year, I will definitely not be making the same mistakes and learning from my mistakes. The next thing that I want to talk about is having a schedule and a system that works for you. In med school, you're going to hear people who have different schedules. Some people wake up really early, some people study really late. It can be very easy to get FOMO and hear about what other people are doing and start stressing and wondering, oh my gosh, why am I not doing that? But really just try to find something that works for you. And the mistake that I made was my schedule was no schedule. Like I would fall asleep randomly because I would just come home really exhausted, and my sleep schedule was all messed up, which made me like break out. I ate a lot of really like sugary and greasy foods because I was like super stressed. My exercising wasn't there. I wasn't like doing my hobbies. I was like constantly stressed. I think establishing a system that works for you and you can fall back on, and just creating that sort of routine gives you that simple piece to set a foundation for a really good study schedule and good health in general. It's med school, so you're not going to be able to all the time get your full 8 hours of sleep. Like there were times where I and many of my like friends had to sacrifice sleep, which is just something that happens. And I'm sure in undergrad, you know, that is also the same thing too, but you can't really like cram in med school. I didn't pull all-nighters, but there was one night where I literally stayed up until like 4, and then our exam, I had to get up at 6 in the morning. So that was like a no-go. Sometimes you just have to do what you have to do, but it is also super important to try to get that sleep when you can. Try to establish systems, whether that be sleep, study, working in time for hobbies and friends. Experiment until you find what works for you, and be flexible and adjust, because med school is a lot of adjusting. Can't be too rigid because things move around, things change, and sometimes you just have to be comfortable with being flexible and adapting. So let's get into the good parts about med school, because there are definitely a lot of good parts. And as I do discuss all of these things, I am very grateful for the opportunity to be in med school, and I would definitely not have it any other way. I've learned so much, and I've become so much more of a more like matured and informed person from being in med school. In undergrad and high school, I lived a very sheltered life, guys. Not a lot of life experiences, and I think learning too, wisdom you have to get from learning and experiences. Like, it's also true that your parents and your friends can tell you their experiences, but you also have to experience things for yourself, and that just happened to be my experience the first year of med school, experiencing a lot of life events at the same time as transitioning into med school, which is quite the roller coaster, but a lot of good things did come out of it as well. Going back to being around the same group of people at the same time, it was super nice to be able to find a really dependable and stable friend and study group. I know in undergrad, I went to a really big college, so I didn't really have an established group of friends. I was kind of just like in and out of classes, and I didn't really have anyone to talk to or hang out with. But in med school, you kind of just go with the flow, and you naturally find the group of people that you really vibe well with. And it's been so fun going through this crazy journey together with them. I've done a lot of things I didn't do in undergrad, like going out to eat after to celebrate our exams. We went on a really fun spring break trip to New York, which was super fun and something I never got to do. Like going out to eat, hanging out, having cool, fun parties. Not the crazy ones, but you know, like just chill ones. Generally commiserating together. I kid you not when I say it's trauma bonding. Like, I tend to study by myself a lot, but I know my friends will be studying in the library or on campus like late into the late hours of the night, and you form a bond when you are with people and you know the struggle. I feel very lucky to have found a very genuinely nice and happy cohort in my med school, because everyone is pretty collaborative. And I think that's also important, to be in a supportive environment where you can learn and not be worried about like being cutthroat. There were a lot of things I got to do in med school that I didn't get to do like ever. I went to my first rave, which was a super fun experience. I loved getting to like dress up, listen to the cool music, and like film and vlog and just hang out with my friends. It was really fun. I went downtown. I lost my phone, which was not great, but I have the experience of having gone down, and now I am like the person in the group who's always like, guys, check to make sure you've lost your phones. And we have not lost any phones so far, guys, even when we went to highly trafficked and potentially like pickpocketing locations like New York. Going on friend group trips, having my first really weird situationship relationship type of thing. In the med school aspect, we have anatomy lab, and being able to hold an actual human heart or get to like touch a brain and see this is exactly like what makes us human. To be able to know the human body at that depth and in that certain experience from the generosity of the donors was definitely a very humbling experience, and something that you only get to experience in med school or another healthcare field. So I'm very thankful for that opportunity and just being able to grow. It was definitely, I'm not gonna lie, it was a difficult year at many parts, and there were times where I genuinely felt very overwhelmed, very stressed, but at the same time, it was a year where I learned a lot about myself. I learned a lot about what not to do, what to do, and I'm excited for what's next.